Hello and welcome to Hotspots, Volume 1, CSX's CE&D Subdivision. I'm your host, James Greenwood. In this film, we will be visiting some of the cities, towns, and places of interest along this 140 plus miles of curves, rivers, and fields. You'll find all kinds of Class 1 railroading running both day and night. Here we'll be showcasing some of our best catches. So come along with us as we visit these hotspots. The CSX CE&D subdivision spans a total distance of 145.6 miles. This map gives you a perspective of how the line lays out along the route. In this film, we'll be starting our journey at the southmost point, Evansville, Indiana, and terminating our trip in Terre Haute, Indiana. Before we begin our journey, let's take a look at a little history dating back before the conception of CSX or the CE&D subdivision. Before there was ever a CSX or even a subdivision to be named, there was the Dixie Flyer route. Back in the early days of freight and passenger service, the C&EI, also known as Chicago and Eastern Illinois Railroad, a Class 1 railroad that opened from 1877 to 1976, linking the Chicago, St. Louis, Southern Illinois, and Evansville, Indiana areas. The Dixie Flyer was a passenger train that operated from 1892 to 1965 via the Dixie route, running from Chicago, Illinois to Miami, Florida, with 2 trains a day running, covering nearly 1,500 miles daily, offering the latest in comfort and luxuries. Reclining seats and sleeping compartments offered passengers a way to relax and unwind while traveling through bustling cities and quiet countrysides, riding the high iron. Our venture begins just north of CSX's Howell Yard, where Evansville Western Railway is working on bringing their daily MVL1 Mount Vernon, Illinois local in to begin its daily work switching out cars with CSX. Like with most, the amount of cars depends on the amount of business seen. Most of the cars seen here are grain loads from the DeKalb Asdale grain elevator located in Mount Vernon, Illinois. A collection of power is at the ready 24/7 to haul their next train. Whether it's coal, mixed freight, or cargo from around the world, these beasts are always ready. Sometimes, when nothing's moving, you still find something worthwhile, like we see here. One of CSX's newer locomotives, the Spirit of Law Enforcement, number 3194, that celebrates and honors fire, police, and paramedics. Sometimes, only one locomotive is needed for a job, like CSX number 128 shown here. Heading north, running as we in the train business like to refer to as light power, which means only locomotive and no cars in tow. This particular locomotive was being operated by a female, so ladies, don't let anyone tell you that girls freight moves constantly throughout the United States by train. About 1.7 ton miles are shipped by rail annually. Railroads primarily transport bulk materials such as lumber, coal, and heavy industrial materials. As you will see in our film, this is not always the case. Here's an example of bulk materials being transported. ID is train M512, which operates daily from Radnor Yard in Nashville, Tennessee, and terminates in Avon, Indiana, with work stops in Casca, Kentucky, Evansville, Indiana, and Princeton, Indiana. A lot of your everyday household items are in some way brought to you by train. Your cell phone that's made in another country, likely transported in a shipping container, in which we will see and discuss later on in this film. Tank cars hauling LP, liquefied petroleum gas, for heating homes, metalworking, and fuel for some machinery and vehicles. Also, that gas grill? Yep, that gas came by train too. Frozen foods of all types are carried long distances by train. This process started in the late 1800s, primarily for transporting meats a long distance. The first recorded use of such was in 1851, when 8 tons of butter was transported by frozen freight from Ogdensburg, New York, to Boston, Massachusetts. Grains, sugars, chemicals for many things, as well as many materials used for building are transported daily across America's heartland and beyond. B426, Calvert, Kentucky, Proviso, Illinois. I remember seeing this train being posted in a Facebook group that covers this exact line. The Union Pacific powered coal train was due north at some point this evening. Hoping to catch this somewhat rare train, we first visited the Howe Yard area. Luckily, this train was visible and was just finishing getting a fresh crew aboard. Hurrying to our go-to spot, we managed to catch this UP duo getting underway for the 300-plus mile trip. High green. In most cases, a green signal means something is on the way. In the years we've been doing this, however, does not always mean an immediate arrival of said train. Sometimes you get something totally unexpected, which in this business makes the sometimes hours of waiting and sometimes getting nothing worth it. Here's a good example. Train G152, powered by 3 BNSF locos, take a run of empty grain cars from Yeoman Yard in Tampa, Florida, bound for Cicero, Illinois, for BNSF to continue on their journey on home trackage, once making the 1,178-mile total trip. No two trains are alike, even if they appear so. Something is always different. I was once asked why I personally take such interest. After all, a train is a train. Sometimes it's in the details. In some cases, complete trains may be going to one specific place, but have more than one load type. Seen here, a mixed shipment of sweetener and grain cars are headed south, perhaps to aid in the mixing of your favorite breakfast cereal or soft drink. Remember a little earlier when we spoke about things that were shipped by rail? This train originated in Jacksonville, Florida, and is going to Bedford Park, Illinois. Let's think for a moment. What could be shipped in those containers, and what might be its destination? In fact, some of the containers will be offloaded onto waiting semi-trailers to continue their trip. A late afternoon conundrum. As sometimes happens, more than one train needs to move. Such is the case here, as M647, a manifest mix train, holds the main line entering Howell Yard in the north, due to an Evansville Western Railway train finishing up their work to prepare to head back to Mount Vernon. Train C-332E, an empty coal train from Cross, South Carolina, en route to Alliance Coal Loadout just north of Princeton, Indiana, waits and finally gets the clearance to proceed on northbound, where the train would begin loading later that evening. Good old Princeton, Indiana. Historic landmarks and the old CE&D depot, originally built in 1875, has seen her share of history pass by her windows. Officially finished restoration on November 2nd of 1986 by the Gibson County Visitors Center. You may be confused as to why our first train shown is of Norfolk Southern livery, when this is a movie about the CE&D. Let me explain. The Diamond, just south of Broad Street, which is our current location in this film, plays host to both CSX and Norfolk Southern, of which, when Norfolk Southern has track clearance, this prohibits CSX from running traffic in either direction until given proper signal. Fast-moving intermodal freight. Moving how tomorrow moves. Train ID I-026 hustles a mix of refrigerated goods as well as dry good containers northbound in the late afternoon sun of Bedford Park, Illinois. Back in October of 2021, Facebook groups were alive with chatter that train W989 was making its way east from California with a special passenger train set that was bound for Jacksonville, Florida, to be put into service for the Brightline passenger line. Keeping tight tabs on its location and communicating with those west and north, we tracked its movements. Once we heard it had cleared Terre Haute, Indiana, we knew time was drawing near. Living in the Midwest has many advantages, one of them being an abundance of grain trains, most of which frequent our southern ports. Some, however, are used here for animal products, food, alcohol brewing, and more. Peak times are typically see an influx of this type of trains are between early and mid-fall to early spring, when farms selling grains are usually at a high point. I cannot begin to tell you the amount of occasions the weather was less than great, yet the trains rolled. Thus, the show must go on. Here we have a northbound Union Pacific-powered empty coal train hustling along, heading to pick up a load of black diamonds. Vantage points. Sometimes it can be almost impossible to get that perfect shot, but as seen here, not all spots are bad. As we wrap up our visit to Princeton, here is something not often seen in our area: a military equipment move. Train W816, led by CSX number 519, leads 4 locomotives southbound with a special train for Fort Stewart, Georgia. While there's not a ton of options in which to shoot from, we couldn't leave the city of Vincennes out of this film, especially with its rich historical roots. A few things worth mentioning, railroad-wise, is the old freight depot, which was later used to house CSX workers in Vincennes until its demise a few years ago. Another is CSX's Alice Yard, located just south of the Diamond in Vincennes. A decent vantage point is possible according to local photographers. Most railroad train enthusiasts often have a specific type of train, locomotive, or car in which they are seeking. During this film, ask yourself, What has caught my attention? Back on track production scale of Canada has a fascination with boxcars, while I prefer seeing the older relics, oddities, such as Conrail, Seaboard System, Rock Island, and even the more local IP&O coal hoppers. Though nearly gone, I believe a few still remain. Here we see another special military move. Tanks, troop transports, and more head south as another load of goods head for Fort Stewart, Georgia. Way back in the summer of 2010, I made my first trip to Sullivan, Indiana, in search of trains to try my luck at whatever CSX may have to offer. Being a virtual newbie as far as CSX and its operations were concerned, I found this particular backdrop inviting for whatever may come along. In addition, Sullivan, Indiana is a good spot to catch other trains such as Norfolk Southern moving south to Oaktown, Indiana to load at their coal loadout. Once a year, CSX and the Indiana Railroad cross paths for a good cause. Santa Train. Upon returning from their Illinois trek, Sullivan, Indiana is the final stop on the final day of the annual event put on by the Indiana Railroad. If you find yourself intrigued by this event or anything you may see here, check out our film, Silver Rails, Tradition, Unity, and the Spirit of Christmas. This event is totally free and worth the trip to visit at a stop nearest you. This event usually occurs during the first weekend of December. To most, Pimento, Indiana is not much more than a gas station and a few homes, but to those who know, it can offer some great opportunities. With a siding spanning some 6,900 feet, this is often a spot where trains tie up to wait for other trains to pass. Since this is the only single track area, this is also where crews will change out when a crew has run out of time to move their train. Something a lot of folks take great interest in is unique power locomotive moves. This day was no exception, as this brand new Metro passenger locomotive was being taken to Chicago aboard this fast-moving freight. A place where most locals, and some who are from out of the area, converge when they're out for train action. Haley Tower, also known as the Wabash Valley Railroad Museum, located at 1316 Plum Street in Terre Haute, complete with a growing collection of railroad artifacts, open to the public from May to October. The other attraction is the double main line. One leading north by west is the CSX St. Louis Line Subdivision, which terminates in East St. Louis near Rose Lake Yard, on its west end. In Indianapolis, Indiana, at Avon Yard, on its east end. Many different types of trains can be seen at this location, anytime, day or night. Train watchers of all ages can be seen taking in the action. Intermodal as well as manifest fixed freight trains are plentiful through here. Coal trains and a local or two who are working local nearby yards are also expected each day. This line has had its fair share of history shown upon its many miles, most of which are now gone forever. Veterans returning from active service, the many years of the Barnum and Bailey circus trains, years of passenger trains and the stories of those traveling passengers long forgotten. The train crews, attendants, aboard these elegant hotels on rails of steel, and last but not least, the switch operators, depot crews, railroad repair crews, and more. We hope you've enjoyed Volume 1 of Hotspots, CSX's CE&D Subdivision. Be on the lookout for more films from Back on Track Productions. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. Feel free to contact us via email or any of our other media outlets. For Back on Track Productions, I'm James Greenwood. Be safe, and we'll see you trackside. Thanks for watching.